The massive alien ships appeared in Earth's solar system like dark clouds blocking out the stars. Admiral Korath stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at the small blue planet through the viewing screen. His reptilian skin gleamed under the harsh lights as he studied the tactical display showing thousands of Imperial warships spread across space. This should be easy, he told his second-in-command. The humans are still using primitive rockets and nuclear weapons. Our scouts reported they barely have any space stations. The alien officer nodded, his 4 arms working at different control panels. Yes, Admiral. Intelligence shows they split their planet into different nations that fight each other. They cannot possibly stand against the Empire. Korath smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. For 300 years, the Galactic Empire had conquered world after world. Some species tried to fight back with energy weapons or particle beams. Others attempted to hide behind force fields or in deep space. None had succeeded. The Empire's crystalline dreadnoughts, powered by dark matter cores, had cracked the defenses of 1,000 civilizations. Earth would be no different. Send the surrender message, Korath ordered. Standard protocol. They have 1 hour to submit or we begin bombardment. Meanwhile, on Earth, Captain James Harrison sat in the command chair of humanity's most closely guarded secret. The Dreadnought Defiance hung in space behind the moon, completely hidden from alien sensors by technology that shouldn't exist. The ship was massive, larger than any human vessel ever built, its black hull seeming to absorb light itself. Sir, we're receiving their transmission, reported Lieutenant Emily Parker from her station. She was young but had trained her entire life for this moment. They want us to surrender unconditionally. James looked around the bridge at his crew. Commander William Stone stood at the weapons console, his experienced hands ready. These weren't just any humans, they were the descendants of Earth's greatest scientists and engineers, people who had spent decades preparing for this day. How long have we been watching them, Emily? James asked quietly. 73 years, sir. Since they destroyed the Centauri colonies. James nodded. The Empire thought Earth was isolated and primitive, but they were wrong. Humanity had been secretly observing their expansion across the galaxy for nearly a century. Every time the aliens conquered a world, human spy ships lurked in the outer systems, recording everything. Every weapon they used, every tactic they employed, every piece of technology they displayed, all of it had been studied, analyzed, and improved upon. The Empire had unknowingly become humanity's greatest teacher. The alien fleet is taking attack positions, Commander Stone reported. They're not even bothering with defensive formations. They think this will be a massacre. It will be, James said grimly. Just not the one they're expecting. Admiral Korath watched as his ships moved into bombardment formation around Earth. The planet's primitive satellites tried to scan his vessels, but their crude sensors could barely detect the Empire's advanced stealth systems. A few human warships had launched from their orbital stations, but they were tiny compared to Imperial dreadnoughts. Admiral, we're detecting one larger human vessel, his sensor officer reported. It's unusual. Show me. The main screen shifted to display the human ship emerging from behind Earth's moon. Korath frowned as he studied its design. It was unlike anything in the Empire's vast databases. Where Imperial ships were sleek and crystalline, this human vessel was angular and dark, its surface seeming to swallow sensor beams. Mass readings are inconsistent, the sensor officer continued nervously. Energy signatures don't match any known propulsion system. Sir, I can't get accurate scans of that ship. Korath's confidence wavered slightly, but he pushed the feeling aside. It's just one ship against our entire fleet. Prepare to demonstrate Imperial power. On the Defiance, James watched the alien formation complete its deployment. Thousands of ships arranged in perfect attack patterns, their weapons charging with energy that could melt continents. It was an impressive sight, the combined might of the galaxy's most feared military force. They are beautiful ships, Emily observed. It's almost a shame we have to destroy them. They made their choice long ago, James replied. Every world they burned, every species they enslaved, every civilization they erased, it all led to this moment. Commander Stone looked up from his console. Sir, their weapons are fully charged. Plasma cannons, antimatter torpedoes, gravity bombs, everything they used to crack the Andromedan homeworld. James stood from his command chair and walked to the forward viewing port. Earth hung in space behind them, blue and peaceful, unaware that its fate was being decided by this single ship and its crew. Open a channel to the alien fleet, he ordered. The transmission crackled to life, Admiral Korath's translated voice filling the bridge. Human vessel, you will stand down immediately. Your planet has been claimed by the Galactic Empire. Surrender now and your deaths will be swift. James smiled coldly. This is Captain James Harrison of the Earth Defense Force. You have exactly 10 minutes to leave our system. Laughter echoed from the speakers as Korath responded. 10 minutes? You face the combined might of 1,000 conquered worlds. Your single primitive ship cannot possibly dash. 9 minutes and 30 seconds, James interrupted calmly, then cut the transmission. The bridge fell silent as both fleets faced each other across the void. On one side, the largest military force the galaxy had ever seen. On the other, a single human ship filled with technologies that had never been tested in real combat. The countdown had begun. Admiral Korath felt his blood pressure rising as he stared at the human ship on his screen. No primitive species had ever dared to give the Galactic Empire ultimatums. His scaled hands gripped the command rail as he opened communications to address what he assumed was human stupidity. This is Admiral Korath of the Imperial Fleet, he announced, his voice carrying across space to the lone human vessel. You have exactly 30 seconds to surrender before we demonstrate why 1,000 civilizations kneel before the Empire. On the bridge of the Defiance, Captain James Harrison sat calmly in his command chair, watching the timer count down. Lieutenant Emily Parker monitored the alien communications while Commander William Stone kept his hands steady on the weapons controls. The bridge was quiet except for the gentle hum of systems that the Empire sensors couldn't even detect. Sir, they're broadcasting on all frequencies now, Emily reported. Standard Imperial surrender demands. Same message they sent to the Rigel system before they glassed it. James nodded slowly. Humanity had recorded that transmission 70 years ago when Imperial forces destroyed the Rigel colonies. They had also recorded the screams of dying civilians and the final desperate messages from Rigel's defenders. Every human aboard the Defiance had studied those recordings during their training. What's our response, Captain? Commander Stone asked quietly. James looked at Earth hanging in space behind them, then at the massive alien fleet spread across his view screen. Thousands of ships that had brought terror to countless worlds now faced a single human vessel. The irony was not lost on him. Open a channel, he ordered. Admiral Korath's expression showed surprise when the human transmission came through. He had expected panic, pleas for mercy, or at least some attempt at negotiation. Instead, the human captain's voice was calm and steady. This is Captain Harrison. You have 8 minutes to leave our system. After that, we will consider your presence an act of war. The alien bridge erupted in what sounded like laughter. Korath himself couldn't contain his amusement. Captain Harrison, do you understand what you face? We have conquered worlds with defenses far superior to your primitive technology. We have crushed civilizations that mastered energy manipulation, genetic engineering, and dimensional travel. We know, James replied simply. We watched you do it. The laughter on the Imperial bridge died away. Something in the human's tone made Korath uneasy, though he couldn't explain why. What do you mean, you watched? James leaned forward in his command chair, his eyes fixed on the alien fleet. For 73 years, humanity has observed your expansion across this galaxy. We studied every battle, analyzed every weapon, recorded every tactic you used to destroy civilizations far more advanced than Earth appeared to be. Admiral Korath felt a chill run down his spine. Impossible. Our sensors would have detected any surveillance. Your sensors detect what we allow them to detect, James continued. We learned stealth technology from the ghost fleets of Vega before you hunted them down. We studied defensive systems from the crystal cities of Altair before you shattered them. We analyzed every innovation that desperate species created in their final hours before you erased them from existence. The Imperial bridge had grown very quiet. Korath's tactical officer leaned over to whisper urgently, Admiral, our deep scans still cannot penetrate that ship's hull. The readings make no sense. Korath ignored him, focusing on the human transmission. Even if that were true, Captain, you face impossible odds. One ship against thousands. Quality over quantity, Admiral, James replied. The Andromedans had the same philosophy when they built their fortress worlds. Very impressive until you used their own gravitational weapons against them. The reference to the Andromedan campaign made several Imperial officers exchange nervous glances. That battle had been classified at the highest levels. How could these humans know such specific details? Commander Stone looked up from his console and nodded to James. The captain understood. All systems were ready, all weapons charged and waiting. Humanity's response to galactic tyranny was finally prepared to show itself. You seem well informed for primitives, Admiral Korath said, trying to maintain his confidence. But information alone cannot stand against Imperial firepower. You're right, James agreed. Information alone is worthless. But information combined with the desperate innovations of 1,000 dying civilizations? That's something else entirely. Lieutenant Emily Parker checked her readings and spoke quietly to James. Sir, they're charging all weapon systems. Energy buildup indicates they're preparing for planetary bombardment. James nodded and stood from his command chair. Around him, his crew moved with practiced efficiency, their hands dancing over controls that operated technology the Empire had never encountered. These weren't just any humans, they were the culmination of decades of secret preparation, trained from childhood to operate systems that pushed the boundaries of known physics. Admiral Korath, James said into the communication system. I want you to understand something. Every species you destroyed left behind knowledge, research data, experimental technologies, theoretical breakthroughs they never had time to implement. We found it all. We collected their final gifts to the universe and turned them into something you've never faced before. Enough talk. Korath roared, his patience finally snapping. Prepare for bombardment. Show these arrogant humans the price of defying the Empire. Across the Imperial fleet, weapon systems came online with deadly precision. Plasma cannons that could melt asteroids, antimatter torpedoes capable of devastating entire cities, gravity bombs that could crack continental plates, all focused on the single human ship that dared to threaten them. Sir, they're locked onto us, Commander Stone reported calmly. All Imperial ships show weapons ready. James walked to the forward viewing port and placed his hand on the transparent metal. Earth was still visible behind them, blue and beautiful and completely unaware that its survival depended on what happened in the next few minutes. Time remaining? He asked. 2 minutes, 30 seconds, Emily replied. James smiled coldly as he returned to his command chair. Then let's see if our teachers were worth the lesson. Admiral Korath's patience finally snapped like a breaking wire. The human captain's calm confidence in the face of impossible odds felt like a personal insult to everything the Empire represented. No species had ever spoken to Imperial forces this way and lived to tell about it. All ships, open fire, he roared across the fleet communications. Reduce that arrogant vessel to atoms. Show these primitives why the galaxy kneels before us. The response was immediate and devastating. Thousands of Imperial warships unleashed their fury simultaneously. Plasma beams hot enough to melt moons streaked through space in brilliant colors of death. Antimatter torpedoes, each one capable of destroying entire cities, spiraled toward their target in deadly formations. Gravity bombs that could crack continental plates fired in rapid succession, their dark energy warping space itself. The barrage was so intense that it created its own light show across the solar system. Energy discharges lit up the void between planets like artificial auroras. The combined firepower represented the accumulated military might of a galactic empire that had conquered 1,000 worlds. On the bridge of the Defiance, Captain James Harrison watched the incoming destruction with complete calm. Lieutenant Emily Parker monitored the approaching weapons while Commander William Stone kept his hands steady on the defensive systems. None of them showed even a hint of fear as death approached at the speed of light. Impact in 15 seconds, Emily reported in her normal voice, as if she were announcing the weather. James nodded and pressed a single button on his command chair. Absorption protocols active. What happened next defied everything Admiral Korath thought he knew about physics and warfare. The plasma beams, each one powerful enough to vaporize a small asteroid, struck the human ship's dark hull and simply vanished. Not reflected, not deflected, absorbed completely as if the ship were drinking pure energy. The antimatter torpedoes followed, their explosive yield equivalent to small stars. They hit the Defiance and disappeared into the hull without even a flash of light. The gravity bombs came last, their space warping effects designed to tear apart any material known to science. They too vanished into the ship's surface like stones thrown into a deep, dark lake. What just happened? Korath whispered, staring at his tactical display in disbelief. His weapons officer frantically worked at his console, checking and rechecking the readings. Admiral, all weapons show successful impact, but there's no damage to the target. Energy signatures indicate, sir, this is impossible. Our weapons aren't being destroyed or deflected. They're being absorbed and converted. On the human ship, Commander Stone smiled as he watched his displays fill with captured energy readings. Sir, we've successfully absorbed and analyzed all Imperial weapons. Plasma cannon specifications recorded, antimatter torpedo designs catalogued, gravity bomb technology completely mapped. James stood and walked to the forward viewing screen where the Imperial fleet waited in stunned silence. The vegan ghost ships taught us energy absorption before you hunted them down. The Centauri developed matter conversion technology before you glassed their worlds. The Andromedans perfected gravity manipulation before you turned their own weapons against them. Lieutenant Emily Parker looked up from her station with a slight smile. All weapon ports are charged and ready, Captain. Shall we return the favor? James nodded once. Show them what human engineering looks like. The Defiance came alive in ways that made the alien observers feel sick with terror. Weapon ports opened along its hull like awakening eyes, each one glowing with captured Imperial energy. But what emerged wasn't just raw firepower, it was precision incarnate, intelligence made manifest in destructive form. The human ship fired a single beam at the nearest Imperial cruiser. The beam was composed entirely of the aliens' own plasma energy, but refined and focused beyond anything they had ever achieved. It struck the cruiser's shields, passed through them as if they didn't exist, and surgically removed the ship's main reactor without touching any other system. The cruiser went dark and dead in space, its crew alive but powerless. Admiral Korath watched in growing horror as his fleet became a testing ground for technologies that shouldn't exist. The human ship moved through his formations like a predator among prey, each attack more precise than the last. Ships that had terrorized civilizations for centuries were disabled with almost casual efficiency. How are they doing this? His tactical officer asked in a shaking voice. The answer came from Captain Harrison himself, his voice broadcast across all Imperial frequencies. You taught us well, Admiral. Every species you destroyed left behind research data, experimental technologies, theoretical breakthroughs they never had time to complete. We found it all. Another Imperial Dreadnought tried to ram the human ship, its captain hoping that physical impact might succeed where weapons had failed. The Defiance didn't dodge or retreat. Instead, it extended some kind of field that caught the attacking vessel and held it motionless in space like an insect in amber. The Rigelians were working on inertial manipulation before you burned their colonies, James continued his explanation. The crystal cities of Altair had developed dimensional folding technology before you shattered them. We took all their unfinished research and made it work. Commander Stone worked at his console with the efficiency of someone who had trained for this moment his entire life. Each weapon he fired was perfectly calculated, targeting specific weaknesses that the Imperial ships didn't even know they had. Hull breaches appeared in exactly the right places to disable weapons without killing crews. Shield generators overloaded in precise patterns that left the ships defenseless but intact. Sir, half their fleet is now disabled, Emily reported. Remaining ships are attempting to retreat. James watched as Imperial vessels began breaking formation, their captains finally understanding that they faced something beyond their comprehension. These weren't just humans with better weapons, this was an entire species that had turned the galaxy's own cruelty into a weapon against itself. Let some of them escape, James ordered quietly. The Empire needs to know what happened here. Admiral Korath's flagship was one of the few vessels still capable of movement. As he ordered his remaining ships to retreat, he stared at the human dreadnought in absolute terror. The Defiance hung motionless in space, surrounded by the wreckage of Imperial pride, its dark hull gleaming with absorbed energy from their own weapons. The demonstration was complete. Admiral Korath's hands shook as he watched the tactical display aboard his flagship. Half of his fleet floated dead in space, their crews alive but trapped in powerless vessels. The other half was retreating in complete panic, their formations broken and their confidence shattered. In his 3 centuries of military service, he had never seen anything like what the human ship had just done. Status report, he ordered, his voice barely steady. His tactical officer worked frantically at his console, sweat dripping from his scaled forehead. Admiral, we've lost 60% of our offensive capability. The human vessel disabled our ships without destroying them. Our weapons are useless, they just feed energy to that thing. Korath stared at the Defiance through his viewing screen. The human ship hadn't moved from its position, hanging in space like a dark monument to Imperial failure. Its hull seemed to pulse with absorbed energy from their own weapons, growing stronger with every attack they had launched against it. On the human dreadnought, Captain James Harrison stood calmly on his bridge, watching the retreating alien ships. Lieutenant Emily Parker monitored communications from the panicking Imperial forces while Commander William Stone prepared the next phase of their demonstration. Sir, we're intercepting their fleet communications, Emily reported. They're calling for reinforcements from the nearest Imperial base. Admiral Korath is requesting immediate support from the 7th Battle Group. James smiled coldly. How long until they arrive? 3 hours at maximum jump speed, sir. Perfect. That gives us time for a proper lesson. James turned to his weapons officer. Commander Stone, select their flagship. Let's show Admiral Korath what we learned from the Vegan War archives. The Defiance began to move, its massive bulk gliding through space with impossible grace. Every movement seemed to violate the basic laws of physics. The ship turned without visible thrusters, accelerated without apparent propulsion, and moved through space as if friction and inertia were merely suggestions rather than absolute laws. Admiral Korath watched in growing terror as the human ship approached his flagship directly. All remaining vessels, concentrate fire on that ship. Everything we have. The surviving Imperial ships opened fire again, their desperation making them reckless. Energy beams, particle weapons, and exotic matter torpedoes converged on the approaching human vessel. But instead of being absorbed like before, something even more terrifying happened. The weapons seemed to bend around the Defiance, following curved paths that led them straight back to their sources. Imperial ships found themselves under attack from their own weapons, fired with perfect accuracy at their most vulnerable points. Impossible. Korath screamed as his own plasma cannons turned against nearby cruisers. Our weapons don't work that way. Captain Harrison's voice came over the communication system, calm and educational. The vegan ghost fleets developed reflection technology before you destroyed them. They never perfected it, but their research notes were very detailed. We simply finished what they started. Commander Stone worked at his console with surgical precision, each command turning Imperial weapons against their owners. Ships that had brought terror to 1,000 worlds now cowered before their own firepower, reflected and amplified by technologies they couldn't understand. Sir, their flagship is trying to escape, Emily observed, watching Korath's vessel break away from the formation. Let him run for now, James replied. We need him to see everything. The Defiance began to demonstrate capabilities that made the surviving Imperial forces question their understanding of reality itself. The ship seemed to exist in multiple places at once, its image fracturing across space like reflections in broken mirrors. When Imperial sensors tried to lock onto it, they found dozens of identical targets scattered across the battlefield. The Andromedans were working on dimensional splitting technology, James explained over the open channel. They called it quantum multiplication. Very promising research, though they never had time to test it properly before you cracked their fortress worlds. Admiral Korath's sensor officer was openly weeping as he stared at his instruments. Admiral, I count 4 to 7 identical ships on sensors, but they're all the same vessel. The readings don't make sense. Nothing makes sense anymore. The worst part wasn't the advanced technology or the impossible physics. The worst part was the clinical efficiency with which the humans used these capabilities. Every move was calculated, every attack precisely targeted, every demonstration carefully planned to show the Empire exactly how outmatched they were. Admiral, his communications officer reported with a trembling voice, we're receiving transmissions from across Imperial space. Similar human ships are appearing near our major worlds. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Korath felt his blood turn to ice. What do you mean, appearing? Sir, identical vessels to this one have just decloaked around the capital world, our primary shipyards, and every major military installation. They're all broadcasting the same message. On cue, Captain Harrison's voice filled the Imperial flagship's bridge. Admiral, what you're witnessing here is happening simultaneously across your entire empire. We've been preparing for this day for 73 years. Every world you conquered taught us something new. Every species you destroyed left behind knowledge we could use. The tactical display showed the horrifying truth. Red warning symbols appeared across the map of Imperial space as human dreadnoughts revealed themselves near every important Imperial world. The Empire's entire military structure was surrounded and vulnerable. The Centauri developed cloaking technology before you glassed their worlds, James continued his lesson. The Rigelians perfected faster-than-light travel before you burned their colonies. The crystal beings of Altair created dimensional storage before you shattered their cities. We took all of it and made it better. Admiral Korath collapsed into his command chair, finally understanding the scope of what was happening. This wasn't just a battle or even a war. This was the galaxy's reckoning with the Empire's cruelty, delivered by a species that had learned from every atrocity the aliens had committed. The human ship hung motionless in space, waiting patiently as the full horror of the situation sank into the surviving Imperial forces. Earth's single defender had just demonstrated that humanity was no longer the prey in this galactic ecosystem. They had become the apex predator. Admiral Korath sat in his command chair aboard his damaged flagship, staring at the communication display with the hollow eyes of a broken leader. Around him, his bridge crew worked in terrified silence, trying to make sense of the tactical reports flooding in from across Imperial space. Every major world, every military installation, every strategic location in their vast empire was now under the shadow of human dreadnoughts. "Sir, we have confirmation from the capital," his communications officer reported with a shaking voice. 12 human vessels appeared simultaneously around the home world. "They're identical to the one here, same energy signatures, same impossible technologies." Korath nodded numbly. The Empire's greatest fear had finally come to pass. They had encountered a species that could not only match their military might but surpass it completely. Worse, these humans had used the Empire's own conquests as a learning experience, turning every act of Imperial cruelty into weapons of retribution. On Earth's orbital stations, Captain Thomas Reed watched the communication feeds coming in from human ships across the galaxy. Each dreadnought had appeared exactly on schedule, surrounding Imperial installations with the precision of a military operation planned over decades. The coordination was perfect, the timing flawless. "All ships report successful deployment," Reed announced to his command center. "Operation Reckoning is in full effect." Meanwhile, Captain James Harrison stood on the bridge of the Defiance, preparing to deliver humanity's final message to the galaxy. Lieutenant Emily Parker had opened communication channels to every inhabited world within 1,000 light-years. Commander William Stone monitored the weapons systems of human vessels across Imperial space, ready to demonstrate Earth's new position in the galactic hierarchy. "Are we broadcasting to all frequencies?" James asked quietly. "Yes, sir. Every species in this sector of the galaxy will receive this transmission," Emily confirmed. James walked to the center of his bridge, his figure now being transmitted to millions of worlds simultaneously. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of humanity's accumulated knowledge and the promise of justice for countless destroyed civilizations. "This is Captain James Harrison of the Earth Defense Force, speaking to all inhabitants of this galaxy. For 3 centuries, you have lived under the shadow of the Galactic Empire. You have watched worlds burn, species enslaved, and entire cultures erased from existence. On the Imperial capital world, Emperor Zorthak himself watched the transmission from his throne room, surrounded by his most trusted advisors. The ancient ruler had conquered personally led campaigns that destroyed hundreds of civilizations, and now he faced the consequences of those actions. We are humanity," James continued, his image appearing on screens across the galaxy. "For 73 years, we have watched the Empire's expansion from the shadows. We studied every battle, analyzed every weapon, recorded every tactic used to break the free peoples of this galaxy." Admiral Korath listened with growing dread as the human captain explained their true purpose. This hadn't been a desperate last stand by a primitive species. This had been a carefully planned revelation, timed for maximum impact across Imperial space. Every world the Empire destroyed left behind knowledge, research data, experimental technologies, breakthrough discoveries they never had time to complete. "We found it all. We collected the final gifts of dying civilizations and used them to build something the Empire cannot stand against." Captain Jennifer Wright commanded one of the human dreadnoughts hovering near the Imperial shipyards. Her vessel, the Retribution, was identical to the Defiance in every way that mattered. Around her, Imperial construction facilities had gone completely silent, their workers staring up at the impossible ship that had appeared without warning. "The vegan ghost fleets gave us stealth technology," James explained to the galaxy. "The Centauri colonies provided faster-than-light innovations. The crystal beings of Altair contributed dimensional manipulation. The Andromedans offered gravitational weapons. Every species you destroyed became our teachers." Commander Robert Hayes monitored the human vessel stationed near the Empire's primary military academy. Students and instructors alike had gathered to stare at the dark ship that hung motionless above their world like a promise of judgment. The psychological impact was exactly what humanity had planned. "You taught us that cruelty spreads across the galaxy like a plague," James continued. "But you also taught us that knowledge is immortal. Every breakthrough, every innovation, every desperate final experiment, it all survives if someone cares enough to preserve it." On distant worlds, species that had lived in terror of Imperial expansion began to understand what they were witnessing. The humans hadn't just survived first contact with the Empire, they had weaponized every lesson the Empire had taught through their conquests. "Today, the galaxy learns a new truth," James announced, his voice carrying across star systems. "Humanity is no longer hiding in the shadows. We are no longer the prey in this cosmic ecosystem. We have become something the Empire never expected, the accumulated vengeance of every civilization they destroyed. Emperor Zorthak finally spoke from his throne, his ancient voice filled with a mixture of rage and fear. "What do you want from us, humans?" James smiled coldly as he answered the question that would reshape galactic politics forever. "We want you to choose, Emperor. The Empire can learn to coexist peacefully with the free peoples of this galaxy, or you can discover what happens when humanity stops being diplomatic." Lieutenant Colonel Margaret Phillips commanded the human ship positioned outside the Empire's largest weapon manufacturing facility. Her vessel's presence had already caused the complete shutdown of production as workers fled in panic. The message was clear: Imperial military superiority was now a thing of the past. "You have one standard galactic day to decide," James concluded his broadcast. "Withdraw your forces from all occupied worlds, release all enslaved populations, and begin negotiations for peaceful coexistence. Or face the consequences of a galaxy that has finally found its defender." The transmission ended, leaving the galaxy in stunned silence. Across Imperial space, human dreadnoughts waited patiently for the Empire's response, their crews ready to demonstrate why Earth had never fallen to any conqueror. The age of Imperial dominance was over. Humanity's time had begun.